Welcome, everybody. For those of you whom I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Nick DePasquale. I am a photographer and photography instructor just north of Boston, about 35 miles northwest of Boston, in Tingsboro, Massachusetts. And I'm very excited about tonight's presentation with Joe Baraban. Joe is my photography mentor and a friend. And really excited about the critiques that he's going to be providing tonight and also answering questions. We have the chat going, so if you have any questions on during the course of the presentation, we'll try to take as many out of the chat as possible. We actually have a lot of images to go through, and we have a lot of questions to go through too. And just a short introduction about Joe is Joe is a Houston-based photographer, and he's also a photography instructor. He currently teaches his Stretching Your Frame of Mind online classes, which are all focused on the elements of visual design and composition. And he also conducts photography workshops around the world when we get to start traveling again. Many of the folks attending this presentation tonight have either taken one of Joe's courses, maybe attended one of his workshops, or even have been exposed to his photographic and creative principles through my own teaching, because my teaching is based on Joe's teachings. And what's amazing about Joe is his unique willingness to share all his creative talents, all of his creative ideas, and everything that he has learned through his experiences in a photographic journey throughout the years, so that everybody can take their work up another notch or so. So tonight's presentation is, as I mentioned, is quite unique. The heart of Joe's online classes and his photography workshops are his critique sessions. Over 20 folks have submitted questions. Actually, I think we have 22 images and 2 questions without images. They'll be critiqued and answered. You'll not only learn a lot from Joe's comments, whether you submitted an image or not, but you'll also get to experience how Joe conducts his critique sessions during his workshops. And as an added bonus, Joe will actually start off by talking about an editing session. And yes, Ellen, I realize that we're going to be moving over to the slideshow momentarily. So, Joe, I am first going to unmute you. Joe, you are unmuted now.
Okay.
Okay, now give me a moment and I will allow you to share your screen. So now you can share your screen.
So I click on start video, right?
Click on share video. Yeah, share screen. The green share screen.
Okay, click on the PowerPoint.
Click on the PowerPoint. And there it goes. Now you just click on slideshow up the top. In the middle, right there. And yeah, start slideshow. It's all yours. Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
And I'll be here and on mute.
Okay, so you can hear me, correct?
You bet. I'm here.
Okay, first of all, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope I don't have what you call a captive audience for the current climate. But thanks to Nick for putting this together, and I've known Nick a long time, and we've worked together over the years. And I have been teaching since 1983, when I was still traveling 220, 230 days out of the year shooting. And I can tell you, all this time, it's very, very difficult to find somebody that can both think with the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. The left side of the brain is the analytical side, and that's the side that just sees a tree. The right side of the brain is the creative side, and that's the side that sees not just a tree, but the pattern of the leaves and the texture of the leaves and the color of the leaves and the way the leaves are lit and the negative space in between the leaves, et cetera, et cetera. And I can tell you, it's not easy for somebody that's been left brain all their lives to be able to switch it over. And Nick is one of the few people that can do that. And I can tell you that it's above my pay grade. So I was asked if I wanted to show my picture, but for some reason, the color resolution, I look magenta. My hair hasn't been cut in a long time. And if you saw my nails, you could see that I could swoop down and take a fish out of the water. Okay, so let's get started here with the first shot. Okay, you know, a big part of editing, a big part of photography, excuse me, is people, when that shutter is clicked, that's really when it begins. And I'm not talking about post-processing here. I'm talking about editing, how to edit your work. And I have countless people always come to me saying, I just don't know which photograph to pick. And so that's why we're doing a little segment on editing. And I've had a couple of people submit more than one photograph so that I can show you the way that I edit. When I'm shooting, and first of all, this is predicated on the idea that you don't take one shot. I take a series of shots. I can't remember ever being able to take one shot, and that would be a wall hanger. It's always a series of adjustments and variations. Separate adjustment is moving your camera a little bit to the left or a little bit down or a little bit right to get something out of the frame. An adjustment could be a point of view change. Okay, so what I will do is I will take all these adjustments and all these variations, and first of all, I download the ones, and there could be 20 or 30, and I will download the ones that I think are worth looking at, and that could be maybe 5 or 6 images, sometimes 3. And I will put those up on my screen side by side. This is what I do, and this is what I've done for a long time. And I will make notes, and I will compare the pros and cons of each photograph, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, exposures, and this is all getting things in the camera before you click the shutter and not relying on the computer to make all your helpful changes and decisions for you. So let's get on. I'm going to show you this first shot and what Nick has done. Now, I don't know how big all your screens are. Nick suggested to use the biggest screen you can. I have a very big screen, very big monitor, so this is how Nick had put them on. And so these are images that I had the photographer submit. And this is a series of shots that this person took. And so they went from the first one, the second, third, and then there was a couple with these tourist boats. So let's just take these without the people. What I'm looking for, first of all, I'm looking for what I teach, elements of visual design. What's more important in the photograph, what's going to keep that viewer around longer. And that's really all about the psychology of Gestalt, to make the viewer an active participant by offering up ways to keep him around. And so when I look at these 3 images, and I can only pick one, okay, so I'm going to look at different things. So in this first shot, it's a nice photograph. It has everything that you need, but it's missing some visual interest, okay? And the second shot has that visual interest. In other words, the information above the horizon line versus the information below the horizon line. And where you have here is not as visually interesting as what you have here. And I'm talking about the way the light hits, this really nice light going on here, the texture of the water, and texture is a basic element of visual design. The formation of the clouds, and look, the patterns that have been formed here that you're missing here. And pattern is also an element of visual design. So now I'm looking for both texture of the water and the patterns. And so now I realize that this is probably a stronger shot than this one based on an objective view, not subjective, objective. In other words, the difference is when you're objective, I have several grandchildren, and Mickey has several, and if a shot has some things, some flaws, like things growing out of their head, etc., I'm going to delete them. I just delete. So that's being objective. Now, of course, I'm going to keep some pictures of my kids because I've shot a lot of variations. Okay, so in this shot, she has included a little bit more of this rock. She's lost the texture of the water, and she still has a formation here, but it's not as strong as this one. Now, including this is the same in each one. I would like to probably have seen more, but but to make the choice of this three based on the way I perceive the elements of visual design, I'm going to go with this shot because it has more elements that it's going to keep the viewer around. Okay, and so then she submitted this shot and she submitted this shot. Now, I like the idea because it's one more thing for the viewer to process. The more things you get him to process, the longer he's going to stick around. So this adds another element. And people like to see people in pictures. And also the scale. Without this tourist boat, you really don't have an idea of the scale of what you're looking at. But by adding this, you can see the scale. Now, what I've done here and here is that one of the ways to create visual tension, is what I talk about in my classes. One of the ways to create visual tension, and I'm not talking about a mental or emotional strain here. I'm talking about visual tension. And visual interest and tension occurs when forces act upon one another. In other words, by placing that boat not there, but here, it creates visual tension. Putting that boat there, to me, is more taking a picture of the tourist boat. But here is making a picture of a tourist boat. In other words, by putting this boat close to the edge of the frame, what you do is you imply content outside the frame. You're telling the viewer that there's more to it that meets the eye. And the same in this shot. Instead of coming into the frame, and I can tell you how many times I've talked to students and people that have told me that they've always heard the rule is to have things moving into the frame, to leave space. Well, that's the silliest rule I think probably there ever was, besides that pesky rule of thirds. So what I want is I want that boat leaving the frame. You see the difference? The viewer knows where this boat is going. Now the viewer wonders where the boat is going next. Okay. Another one that I had the photographer submit to be able to decide, okay, you can only use one. Which one's it going to be? So here, what he has done in this photograph, he's taken out that plastic bag, which I would have done as well. So it's cleaner and it's simpler and it's more organic this way without this plastic bag. So from this one to this one, I probably like the idea. Now my question, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him, is does this artist know that you're taking her picture? And to me, that's the criteria, because it's one thing to photograph people doing things, but because the way that I am, and I don't photograph what I see, I photograph what I like to see. So I'm going to let her know that I'm taking her picture and talk to her for a while, not with my camera in my hands, but talk about the fact that we're both artists and that canvas on an easel is just like a tripod, a camera on a tripod. We're both artists. She's chosen one medium and I've chosen another. So I want to talk to her so that I have a little more control over what I want to photograph. Okay, so the next one and the next one. So here, obviously that sign's got to go. It's competing and it's distracting and it's just not necessary. And I always say that if it's not helping, more than likely it's hurting. So I'm going to get rid of that sign. And besides the sign, I like the shot, except for the fact that you can't see her face. I want to see the expression. I want to see how engrossed and how she's really into her art. And you can't see that there. Here, you can. You can sort of see what she is. And one thing that I like about this is this highlight on those glasses. Believe it or not, that tiny little thing provides a certain amount of visual interest right there. So out of all of them, I'm going to probably go with this one because it has more environment. If you go back to this one, I like the shapes of the bridge. And if I've got to choose between this one and this one, I'm going to probably go with this one because it's simpler. I think that this bridge, although it's very cool and I like the patterns and the design, I think it competes with her. So this is all part of the process of critiquing. And if I can only pick one, even without this sign, I'm going to go with this shot right here. Okay. Give you all a chance to read this. I've gone over this several times, so I pretty much know. But if you can read it real quick, you can get an idea of this person's thought process before he clicked that shutter. Now, I'm going to refer back to this, so when I go to the photograph, you're not going to be caught midstream. Get it? Midstream. Okay, I will refer back to this. Okay. So let me show you the photograph. So at first look, it's a very cool photograph. But if we get into the details, it's not sharp. This is just not sharp anywhere, and it's sharp right here. So you really want to, a lot of times, shoot on manual focus. And I can tell you that autofocus is a luxury. It's not a necessity. So in order to make sure that I have complete control, and I always want to have complete control, I'm going to probably manual focus. Now, I'm not sure if we go back, he never mentions whether he was on a tripod or not. And that's really important. If I'm out there and I'm walking around, I'm on a tripod. And I've, over the years, because I'm from the film era, I use a tripod. And to me, a tripod is just an extension of the camera. And I'm very, very quick. So I'm going to be on a tripod here, walking around. And I think that's part of the problem, where you have some sharp areas, but then you can see how it goes off. And I think, Nick, we talked about the shot. And I think Nick said that he had shot this at f/22. Is that correct, Nick?
Yeah, this was f/22.
Okay. At what shutter speed?
13 seconds.
Okay. 13 seconds. And it doesn't say he was on a, well, he would have to be on a tripod for 13 seconds. But the problem is that such a long exposure, there's going to be movement in the water. Even the tiniest little movement, 13 seconds, there's no way that you're going to get things sharp. It's just not going to happen. So you might be able to go in later and sharpen this up. I'm not sure. It could be too far out of focus to sharpen it. So that's the first thing that I want to mention, is this current is moving that all around, and the photographer should be cognizant of that fact. Okay, so having said that, it's a very cool shot. The viewer, who as a Westerner was brought up to read from left to right. This is how we perceive from left to right. So he's taken this viewer on this ride all the way up here. And when you first saw this photograph, I'm going to bet you were following this current all the way up. And in my class called The Psychology of Gestalt, this is called continuance, where you are leading the viewer around this frame up to the message, or sometimes the payoff. So this is really a beautiful flow going up here. So to try to figure out how to compensate, do we know what the ISO was, Nick?
Yeah, I believe it was 100. Let me just double check. And we have a question from Stella. Yeah, it was ISO 100.
Okay, well, one problem is it was an ISO 100.
Yeah,
I would have jacked that. Now, of course, it depends on the camera. Nick and I had a conversation about that. I always say that I keep my camera at 800. I never change it. It's just simple. It makes my life easy. My poor little tired old brain underneath a lot of gray hair wants things simple, so I shoot at 800. Here, I think if he would have increased this, providing he had the camera that could take a high ISO, because a lot of cameras out there that are not real expensive cameras cannot take a high ISO. And even at, let's say 400, they're going to get a lot of noise to it, and so much sometimes that you can't even do it. So it's really based on the kind of camera that you could, where you could eliminate that 13-second exposure.
Okay. So we have a question from Stella, and she was asking, where would you focus in this particular photo?
Okay, good question. Okay, let's say that I'm not at a 13-second exposure because I'm shooting at probably at 800, which is going to cut the exposure time down a lot. All right, so what I'm going to do is I've got to shoot at f/22. For me, it's automatic. When I want something sharp from all the way down to the bottom, all the way up to the top, it's automatic f/22. And I'll bracket the shutter speed and keep that f-stop at f/22. So what I would do here is I would be on manual focus for one thing, so that I can focus down in here. And then what you want to do is focus about a third of the way to that frame. Instead of focusing here, you're going to focus here at f/22, and this will pull everything sharp. Okay. Hopefully people can read pretty quick. We have a lot of information to go through. Okay, so the first problem here, it's called dynamic range. And dynamic range is the range between the highlights, the brightest part of your photograph, which would be here, and the darkest part of your photograph. It's called dynamic range. Now, our eyes have a capacity to see about 24 stops, depending on what article you read, 24 stops. So we can see this information down here and then look up here, and in a fraction of a second, our eyes will adjust, and this will be the right exposure. We look back here, this will be the right exposure. The problem is the camera can't do that. The camera can only see, and again, depending on what you read, about 12 to 14 stops. And there's a particular camera, and I think it's a Nikon something or other, that has the biggest latitude for a dynamic range. Okay, so if I'm standing there, I'm going to immediately say, okay, there's no way that I'm going to get a good exposure out there and get a good exposure in here. It's just not going to happen. So what you want to do, unless you want to clip the highlights, which I love doing because it's energy, I'm going to expose for the highlights. I want to make my exposure out there. Now, of course, depending on what your meter's set on, that's not going to be easy to do. So if you have the meter in your camera, you want to put it on spot, walk up here, take a reading on manual, take those readings, come back here and set your camera on those readings. And that will give all that a good exposure. Now, of course, what's going to happen is this is going to be dark, but you're going to be able to go in and open up the shadows. Again, hopefully you're shooting on RAW, because if you're not going to have the information in the shadows to lighten up. If this was shot in RAW, you could lighten this up enough to make it look good. Here, you're talking about, I don't know, is that ice? Is that snow? Well, there's no detail in there at all. So you've got it, there's no way that you could expose for this and come back in and put detail in there, because if there's no tone, there's no way you can put in any detail. So I like the composition. The wider the lens in this situation, the better. I would not shoot this as a vertical. But having said that, as I tell everybody that I know, my fellow photographers, always shoot both ways. Every time you shoot a horizontal, your next shot is a vertical. Every time you shoot a vertical, your next shot is a horizontal. At least look at it both ways. I would quickly rotate my camera and look at it vertically, but obviously you're not going to get this expanse. So this is the kind of shot. By the way, I sort of like this. This gives some information. This is important, I think, to add to it. So it's really a good shot. I like the guy leaning forward. You can see that he stands out, the negative space around there where he stands out. So I like this too. So overall, it's really a good composition, but what you have to always think about is dynamic range. Okay, so here, what I might do to achieve a better photo. Okay, first of all, I rarely ever use the word better. I always say the word stronger. For some reason, better is just, it's not something that I want to say. What's considered better for one person is not better for the other. A stronger photo. Okay, so it depends on when she first saw this person that she wanted to follow him. And it depends on how many shots that she took. Did she take just this one shot and move on? And according to my post that I wrote about staying around longer, or did she follow this guy? Now, I'm going to follow this guy because of the dog, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep shooting and following him all the way down that street until I get tired of shooting him. I'm going to let him walk way ahead of me. I'm going to shoot with a long lens, or hopefully the lens where I can knock it all out of focus. I'm going to do one where he's in focus. You're not going to just shoot one shot and have it be the keeper. It's just not going to happen. I can't do it. So now I'm walking and I'm noticing things. And one thing that you want to notice, and I first looked at this, I thought this dog was tethered to this bike. See that? That's one of the things when you're walking and shooting, you got to notice that. This is what is called a proximity law. And it's one of the concepts in Gestalt that I teach. So this is something, and it's easy to take out, but it's better to let them take a step so this is not in your shot. So that's really basically what it is. You keep shooting. You just follow them and you keep shooting. Wide, not so wide, looking ahead. This is how you make stronger pictures because you're giving yourself options. The more options, the better your chances of coming back with a wall hanger. So this is probably the only question like this. And so I decided to see if Nick, my IT go-to guy, to actually include Denise so that we can talk, because there's questions I need to ask her before I can answer this. And I never answer without all the information that I can possibly get. Okay, so
I am going to, I think Denise, I may have just unmuted you. You're unmuted,
I'm here.
Denise. There she is. Denise is from Hollis, New Hampshire.
Okay, Denise, the reason why I did this, because I need to find out some question, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so you said when you feel you're in a rut. Okay, so what are you talking about? What kind of rut?
Well, right now I am limited to shooting in my house and in my yard. So I'm feeling like I have just so many subjects to focus on.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'm limited right now to where I can go for several reasons, but I'm finding I'm taking pictures of the flowers, I'm taking pictures of the birds.
Okay. Well,
flowers, the birds.
okay, you're not allowed. Okay, so this is not your rut. This is, there's no geographic boundaries for this rut. Everybody's in this rut. I thought you were in a different rut, but this is problematic. This rut's going to go away. Okay, this is not something that's going to be permanent. So that's why I wanted to make sure of what kind of rut. Okay, so I just got through teaching 3 classes. I have a part 1 class where we study and work on the elements of visual design. I have a part 2 class that is a continuation, and there we work on creating shadows, silhouettes, everything else besides the element of visual design that they get in part 1. And then I was teaching a class in the 6 concepts in the psychology of Gestalt. Now, it just ended. So can you imagine, and I give assignments, every week a new lesson, an assignment comes out. And I had a lot of people sign up, and as of today, and I do video critiques of every image, and I let people submit 2 images every day, where most of the classes in the school, they submit 3 every week. So I did 250 videos in this last 4 weeks, which is fine. I love doing it. So they all share the common problem, is that they had the same rut, shooting inside, shooting in their yard, but they found ways to overcome it. And one of the reasons in my part 2 and part 3 class is they were armed with their artist palette. And that artist palette has all the elements of visual design on it. It has texture and pattern and form and balance and color, all these things. And now they can use those to create images in their house, whether it's side lighting from a window or whatever it is. If you're out in your yard, and if you can get any kind of light in there, you're not shooting at 11 o'clock in the morning, you're shooting very early in the morning and very late in the afternoon. So there are ways to overcome this. If you're armed with the right, I hate to say ammo, although I do live in Texas, if you're armed with the right kind of things that will inspire you, then it comes naturally, and you can see these kind of things. You know, it reminds me of a post that I wrote, and it's under the folder, My Favorite Quotes. And one of them was said by Marcel Proust, who was an 18th century French novelist. Mm-hmm. And he once said, "The only true voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but in finding new pictures around it." But virtually looking around, I can't remember right now, but not in seeking new landscapes, but basically finding things here. So you don't have to go very far away to find the shots. You just have to be looking, and you got to be looking with the right side of your brain. You can't go out there and look around and see, oh, with the left side of your brain, well, there's some flowers there, and there's a garage, and there's this, and there's that. You've got to look at with the right side of your brain, and that's the side that's going to see things that are not readily there by people that use the left side of your brain. And that's how you're going to spark the creative juice. And of course, you sign up for my class or Nick's. Okay, does that answer you? Does that help?
Yeah, you know, yes, I need to be looking at what I have available in a different light, I think.
Right, different light and different points of view.
Right.
You know, you see, you have flowers, you know, so I collect flowers. I have, my whole yard has flowers. Mickey and I, we have lots and lots of flowers. And so I sometimes will get underneath the flower and look at the flower from underneath, looking up to backlight the flowers, because anything translucent will glow. And I can tell you, if you have a lot of flowers, let me give you one more quick tip, because then we got to move on. You ever heard of glycerin?
Yes, and I actually have some glycerin. Yeah.
Okay, let me give you a quick tip. You take a little spray bottle, okay, an empty spray bottle, and you put maybe about a ½ an inch of water in it, or an inch of water. And then you add some glycerin to it, a little bit at a time, until you shake it up. And when you spritz a wall, and those drops do not run, then what you do is you go out and you spritz those flowers and it'll look like dewdrops.
Ooh.
Okay?
Okay. Yep.
And then you backlight those drops and those petals, and it's going to open up an entirely new world for you.
Excellent. I have some good backlight late in the afternoon, so.
There you go. You got it.
Great.
So you have my email address. You know, send me what you do based on the glycerin. I'd love to see it.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Okay, Ellen. Okay. So Ellen submitted this picture. Okay. And so the first thing I asked Nick was to get Ellen to submit the original photograph in color. I wanted to see what she started out with. Okay. And this is the color. And then she converted it to black and white. Okay. So I love black and white. I started out years and years and years right after the dinosaurs disappeared, and I was shooting mostly all black and white for the wire services. So I come from black and white. In fact, my camera was loaded with black and white film, so you had to think in black and white. In other words, I worked in tones from pure black to pure white, and the 10 steps and go in between it, which is what I studied when I studied art. And so by doing what a lot of people do, by shooting it in color and then deciding to convert it to black and white, you're really not getting the feel of really what the black and white was to begin with. If you want to shoot in black and white, then go out and shoot only in black and white. This is just a recommendation. And let me say that all this stuff, this whole time that we're doing this, what I say is not gospel. These are what I do to achieve my pictures, and based on about 53 years of shooting. So if you want to shoot black and white, just get your camera so that you can't shoot in color. You can only shoot in black and white. This particular situation, I prefer the black and white. And trust me, I'm from a black and white. My whole career was based in black and white, but I prefer the color here. Now, one thing before we get into the design of your photograph, when you photograph in color, you're photographing their clothes. When you photograph in black and white, you're photographing their souls. This has always been a saying that I have used and spread for a very long time. Okay, so again, I prefer the color. Okay, but now quickly. If you divide this frame in half, right there, divide that frame in half, all the visual weight is on this side of your frame. And there's nothing over here to help balance that. So balance being a basic element of visual design, I'm always looking for balance. So in this photograph, they obviously know that you're photographing them. So I'm going to take this shot, and then I'm going to make an adjustment, and I'm going to move over here and see if I can't get this photograph a little better balance instead of all this weight over here. And as I said, there's nothing over here. And then 3 things I've taught my classes: 15-point protection plan, and I don't want to get into them all. Border patrol, and you check the 4 corners. Let's just get into border patrol. So right before I click the shutter, I quickly check all 4 edges of my frame, very quick. And it may be after I take the first shot, but at some point, very quick, I'm going to check. And I'm going to see that I've cut his ear off. And I want his ear in there. So what probably is going on is that you are trying to concentrate on everything going on, that you're missing stuff like that. And sometimes it's not a problem. Sometimes it's okay. Here, I'd like to pull back and show more of him. But that's just a personal opinion. The main thing is that don't make your decisions in front of the computer. Make your decisions before you click the shutter. Okay, referring quickly to this last sentence, what would you do to post-process? Well, hopefully I wouldn't have to. You see, I come from a time way back where Adobe was a type of house in the Southwest. There was no Adobe, there was no Lightroom, there was no Photoshop. It had to be in the camera, perfect exposure in the camera. So for me, although I will work on all my images to some extent, I'm not going to say that I don't. I work on them a little bit. But for me, the challenge is getting it in the camera before I click the shutter so that I don't have to rely on a computer to complete my work of art. Okay, so first thing I notice is this rock is out of focus. It's not sharp. And this is up close and personal. And all this texture, all this needs to be sharp. And so, Nick, what was she shooting at?
Oh, let me take a quick look. She was shooting at, I can't read the small print, f16 at 1/30th of a second, ISO 100.
Okay. And what was the focal length?
Focal length was 16 millimeters.
Was she at 16?
She was at 16.
Okay. So, which is really odd. At 16.
Well, actually, so it's interesting because focus was at 16, but she was on a crop sensor camera, so the equivalent was 24.
Okay. Okay. So when you take this shot, and because you've got the luxury of staying there for as long as you want, and the luxury in the digital era of taking a look at the back of your camera. And if your camera has adjustments, you can zoom in on every aspect to check to see if they're sharp. And you would know that this was not sharp. And because it's up close and personal, you've made it the subject. You've made these rocks the subject. Now, the mountain range and everything else are points of interest, but because this is up close and personal, in my opinion, this is at least one of the subjects, so it needs to be sharp. And so how do you do that? Well, it depends on what your focus is, what your camera's set on. And it's set on all different kinds of things. Everybody sets it on something different. Points here, where you point this and this, and that's just above my pay grade. I don't listen to any of that. I bought my first digital camera. Everything is basically on the default settings, and that's the way I shoot. And my pictures come out pretty good. So here, what you want to do, first of all, is you want to set it on manual focus. And you focus on this rock. Okay? You make that rock sharp. Then you want to focus about a third of the way in at f22. And so this is where you want to kind of focus so that you get this rock sharp and all the way back to the horizon. So that's the first thing that you want to do. Now, I think it might be a little too far gone to be able to sharpen it. Maybe you can, I'm not sure. So again, you got the luxury of checking the back of your camera to see. Now, here, again, look at the visual weight going on here. Look at the frame in half. All this visual weight, the mass, the positive space is over here. And there's really nothing over here until you get way back there. So it's not a real balanced photograph. And again, in the digital era, you've got the luxury of checking whether your picture is balanced or not. Whenever you feel something is strange or weird and you don't know what it is, look at the back of your camera and turn your camera upside down. And what that's going to do, it's going to make you see with the left side of your brain, the analytical side. And that's the side that's only going to see shapes. It's not going to see rocks and reflection and mountains. It's just going to see shapes. But when you look at it right side up like this, you're looking at it with the right side of your brain, and that's the creative side. So a good way to test it is just look at your camera, look at it upside down. It's amazing that you'll be able to tell. Okay, so I don't know. It looks like, and Nick, we looked at all these pictures. It looks like you may have done some post-processing. because seems a little strange up here. So I'm not sure if what you did up here or not. This is beautiful. And because it's beautiful, I really want to make this more important. If that means getting down on my knees and getting this up close and personal, then that's what I'm going to do. With a wide angle lens, you're still going to get all that, but you're going to get this, and all the sky and this reflections is really what you want. And this is what I would go after, because one of the ways to create visual attention, to show the subject and its reflection. Not a lot of insight here, so we'll, okay. First of all, I look at this picture and I go, this guy is not happy. Look at him, he's a grouch. And I'm not sure why. Maybe he's just into the music or for whatever reason. So
that was, Joe, that was Houston, Texas weather on that day. I remember that back in July when they had the folk festival. So that's probably 85, 90 degrees, humid, out in the sun. So he may not have been happy because of that.
Come on, Nick.
Houston weather. Houston weather.
Yeah, that ain't nothing. Anyway, okay, so you've got this person playing, and you've got this person playing, and this person's not playing. Then, now these are adjustments. These are the things I look at. Is, first of all, I hate wires. Mickey and I, you will not see a wire in our house. They're hidden by either a vase, or they're hidden behind a wall, they're hidden behind furniture. So the first thing I'm going to do when I'm looking at the shot is I do not want this in my picture. So I'm going to have to change my point of view. Maybe it's coming over here and shooting this way. But whatever it is, I do not want this in my photograph. That's first and foremost. And then I'm going to work on these guys and to watch it. And that camera is up to my eye. That camera's not resting on my chest waiting for stuff to happen. I'm following them with that camera up to my eye. And it might be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, but that viewfinder does not leave my eye, so that I can make sure that in a split second, I might get the three of them doing something. Now, one thing that I noticed, one thing I like about this picture, and it goes back to the elements of visual design, and one of them is shape. And the basic shapes are rectangles, circles, squares, and triangles. And I always try to think about that. What I like is this implied triangle right here that really unifies the three of them. So you may or may not be aware of that, but this is a powerful symbol, this triangle right here. And then what I always like to do, and I've been shooting musicians for a long time, I want to go behind them. I want to shoot from back here. I want to see who they're playing to. So, and among all my points of view and everything I do, one thing I'm going to be sure to do is stand back there and get a shot. So reading this, and I've read it several times, the first thing that really caught my attention was, where is it? Here it is, right here. I started walking back up the boardwalk to find a better shot and settled for this one. Man, that's not a good word. Paul. You don't ever settle for anything. So I don't know if it's just part of your conversation or you were really just settling for this one. So you don't want to ever settle. Okay, so here's the shot. And it's really a very cool photograph. And you're exactly right. People like to see people in pictures. Okay. And also, I always like to include people because they give scale. Besides the fact of the lonely, that he's alone and all that, I like to give scale because without this person, you may not be aware of just exactly how vast this environment is. But since we know the general height of people, we can figure out that this guy is really small in the scheme of things. Okay, so you are exactly right. One of the things we work on is directional lines and ways to lead the viewer around the frame. This is all a part of keeping the viewer an active participant. So absolutely, because you got that viewer in his comfort zone because he's going from left to right, you got him walking here. So now the viewer is going to follow this to the message. And this is the message right here. All right, so the one thing is that, let me show you this shot. Okay, this is what your meter read. This is what snow looks like. The problem is that if you let that meter make all your decisions for you, it's going to take an exposure that it thinks is a gray card. In other words, this may be about 60% of black. And so all the more reason to not use the meter in your camera, especially with snow. You want to shoot on manual and bracket to this. This is the way the snow is. And it's just a common practice that people, first of all, they listen to the meter in their camera, which is not in your best interest. And shooting snow, they don't realize that that meter is not going to give them pure white snow. But look at the difference here. Besides that, it's a very cool photograph. I really like how you've kept the viewer involved in your picture. Okay. So you said, here's my very side preview. Okay, very side man. Well, yeah, you are taking a picture of a man at work. The key word here is you're taking pictures. So who's going to really be interested in this picture besides the company right here? Now, of course, you can't put on these shoes and climb up there, in which I have back in my well-spent youth. But what you want to do is figure out how you can go from taking a picture to making a picture. And so I don't know if this was the only shot you took. And it follows my post. I came, I shot, I left. So if that's what you did, it's going to be very difficult for you to come back with a great shot. So you've got to look for ways to make a picture. So one thing I might do is I might stand directly underneath him and try a shot. Now, it may or may not work, but I'm going to try that shot. I love this stuff. This is great. This is great texture. I love this. So it's trying to figure out how you go from taking a picture to making a picture. Okay, so this guy, ordinarily, if I was taking this picture and I wasn't sitting on this limb or this limb, then I would try to, now he probably can't hear you, but let's just say for the sake of argument that you had a loud bionic whistle like I do, and you whistled and you got his attention so that he turned around and looked at you while he was still working. So what that is body language. That's just an expression. So I'm going to try everything I can. Now, you might not be able to do that, but I'm going to wait and see if I can't get him to turn around or something else besides just the motion of him cutting down these limbs. And that's the difference that you want to work on between taking and making pictures. Okay. Okay, Diane. The first thing, if you had taken my classes, you would know what's called the 15-point protection plan. And that is, I have 3 rows of 5 dots. And they're invisible dots. They're only in your imagination. I've actually had people ask me why their camera doesn't have those dots. It's just a figment of your imagination. But imagine these dots. And what I do, and I can do it so quick, is that I look in all 4 directions of each dot. And I'm looking for things. And in this situation, I'm looking and I see that the Space Needle is being cut off. And I really don't want it cut off. I look at it not just as a Space Needle, but this beautiful circle. See, that's what I see. The left side of your brain is going to see the Space Needle. The right side of your brain is going to see a beautiful circle made up of all these lines and all these shapes. That's what I see. So that said, I want to show the whole Space Needle. If you're going to include it in there and you made it part of your text, that means that was part of your subject. And so that's the first thing I want to do, is get that entire circle in the frame. Now, it's okay. It's going to be covered up by this, but that's okay. You're still showing the whole circle. And I like the idea. I really like that you're doing this to get this up close and personal. That creates depth in this back there. But it's just fine-tuning things. For one thing, I would avoid this line. See, this is a line. These are lines. These are skinny lines. This is a thick line. And line is the most important of all the elements of visual design. I see a line here. I see a big, thick line. And I see it so thick and heavy that it's just not as delicate enough. So I want to avoid that line and just work on these thinner lines here. So that's another thing I want to work with. So maybe it's standing on the other side of this glass to get rid of this and be able to get that whole Space Needle in that photograph. Besides that, I really like the idea. Your idea is good. And I think given maybe some additional information, you can go back and see what else you can do. Okay, John, I see you're from Minneapolis. Now, that's not necessarily the city that I would want to be in right now. Okay. So what I'm getting by just reading this is that this is not a bad thing. This is just an observation, not a judgment, that you're moving away to photography and more into art, computer art. And so you're just changing things around and doing computer art, which again is fine. Different genres. I enjoy all kinds of art, but basically you're into computer art now. Okay, so the shot, you said that you inverted it. Okay. So I'm assuming that this is the final version. Is that correct, Nick?
No, I think this was the original shot, and then the next one is the final shot.
Okay, so this is the original shot, the way that he saw it. And it's obvious that it's a reflection, and it's clear. And I just wrote a post that won't come out till October. I write a post that comes out every 5 days, and for the past 10 years, and I haven't written till October because they're timeless. It's not like what I did last summer. So the post that I write it's about negative space here. And what I like about this, it's so well defined, all this negative space, and it's so important. If those legs were together, it looked like he was wearing some kind of a long dress from some kind of Mediterranean country. But it's this negative space that was so important, that defines the legs. It's this negative space that's working so well. It's this negative space. So It really is very well defined. And as I was saying about a post I wrote, it's called crystal clear. And if you follow my blogs, I even sometimes put a link to the song or film where I got the idea. And this is for A Few Good Men, crystal clear. So you want to be crystal clear. And this to me is crystal clear. Now, one issue that I have is that this is all out of focus here and here. And this is really good texture. So I want to be able to make sure that this is in focus. So I don't know how much time he had here. He may have only had a moment to get this shot in the reflection. So I don't know, but let's just say if he could have, I would want this sharp because it's texture. I would want to get this sharper. Okay, so now this was the original shot. And so he inverted it to this. Okay, so you can decide, here's this, and here's this. Okay, so what happens is that from here, it's pretty much crystal clear and a quick read that this is a reflection in water. Okay, here, you don't know that. You do not know for sure what it is that you're looking at. And again, it's an observation. There's things I sort of like about it. But when I was talking with Nick, when we were going through all these images, is that I think, well, maybe this is just, he's in some underground thing and looking up through this glass that people are walking on. You see what I mean? This no longer necessarily looks like a reflection. It's a totally different look. I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. I'm saying that it's totally different from this. This is crystal clear that it's a reflection. This offers up a lot of information the viewer may question. He may wonder what it is that he's looking at. And I can tell you that sometimes the viewer will get so frustrated and not knowing what's going on, he will reject the picture. And so you don't want that to happen. So again, there's things I like about this. For one thing, it's a better exposure. It's clear, brighter. But here, if you're trying to say reflection in the water, then I would stick with reflection. Okay. So the main thing, here's the shot. Okay, here's the shot. This is what Stan said. Okay. It reminds him, okay, his own personal thought, right? It's how he felt right now. Okay. It's great about this time of year for get a captivity. Is that what everybody else thinks? I don't know. Probably not. So my point is that if you want to get your message across to the viewer, you almost have to put your mind and your body into that of the viewer. So now that you become him, you are the viewer. So now when you look at it, are you going to get this out of it? I think it's a little esoteric. So again, just be careful of the words that you choose, because if this was a title of some print, I'm not sure everybody's going to get that from you. So unless you're shooting for yourself, that means you're shooting for other people, and make sure that your message is getting across to everyone else. Okay. The idea is great. again, I'm always looking for stuff like this. My problem is this right here. This is pretty distracting. This big black line that's right between her eyes going all the way down here. So the subtlety of all this is gone. From this point on, it's just regular. So that's the problem that I have with it. And I can see that there may have been more information to get that in. So again, great idea, but you got to work on adjustments and variations, and you have to see this and this and this, and then determine. And now also it appears that, and I could be wrong, but looking at the quality of the light, that sun may have been behind you. And that's why, besides this shadow, there's no shadows on the face. So there's no form. So it's really pretty hot light. And then when you add this, it makes it pretty stark and harsh. So what do you wish? Well, I wish the same shot with this kind of design over the face, but with a light much lower and much softer. This would be what I would want to try. Okay, so let me give you a little backstory here. Don was with me, as well as Nick, in my workshop last year. It may have been last year. I don't remember, last Wednesday. Last year, maybe the year before, I'm not sure. But it was my workshop that I did in Spain. And we do wonderful workshops, and I plan ahead. I have a producer. In fact, the very last shot we're going to look at is from a woman that is producing my workshop in Italy. And we postponed it, obviously, because we were starting out in Milan. So think about that. So we postponed it, and this woman, it was a lucky find for me. She is a translator that works freelance for a lot of United Nations and countries, so she speaks multi-languages, took my online class, said that what do I think about producing a workshop? And so we worked on this for months. And so we shot, this was not her doing this, by the way. So one of the locations was, we went to La Mancha, where we photographed the windmills, where Don Quixote took his famous ride trying to kill the windmills. And so we're up, way up high here, shooting these windmills. And so Don took this picture. So it's really a disconnect. So this could be anywhere. I mean, this picture could be taken for the commercial real estate people that may be buying up all this land and putting up high rises. Here you have industrial buildings, all this industrial stuff. It doesn't say where he was. And if you're going to be there, you really want to get that point across to the viewer. All these beautiful windmills and this fabulous light we had, you can sort of see that we were beginning to get fabulous light, the long shadows. But it left out what we were there for. It's just this shot. And so therefore, it's not a shot that I would take because of that. And it's just very industrial. So that's probably the reason why I would not have shot this picture in the first place. Okay. When I looked at this, and I don't know what was done here, but this is very cool. This flat kind of compressed look is beautiful. I love this shot. Now, on the building, okay, so the building I have problems with. And one thing is that all this going on inside all the windows. Now, if there was this kind of cool stuff in all the windows, I'd say, okay. But I would go with this windows right here being everywhere, so that it was just simple design, this really pretty blue. Look at the patterns, the basic element of design. Look at these wonderful kind of rectangles, a basic element of visual design. And so to me, this and this competes with this beautiful lit water tower. And so I don't know how many variations that Claire took, but I'm going to definitely try some without all this to see what it looks like with just maybe this part coming up instead of this. Again, it just kind of distracting. It sort of clutters up this beautiful image. And so if you can imagine this image just by itself, that's a little overexposed because I did this very quickly. But again, it's a different shot. But because of the light, and light is everything. To me, it's everything. Unless you're street shooting and you're trying to grab a moment, or you're photographing something humorous where you don't need good light, light is it. And this is absolutely fabulous. I've never seen a water tower that looked this good. So here, I like it where it is, but I just have issues with the windows. Okay, first, the black and white. Okay, and it's crop. Okay, first of all, let me tell you very quickly, and people that know me know how I feel about cropping. I've been shooting 53 years. And in 53 years, I've never cropped a photograph, not once, ever. I compose in the camera. And I read once, and I wish I had written it, that when you crop, it's a sign of sloppy technique and a lack of discipline. I didn't write it, but I agree with it. You don't need to crop. Get it in the camera. Okay, so here she said that she likes the black and white better. Okay, well, again, we go back to how I feel about black and white. And I said that when you photograph in black and white, you photograph the souls. When you photograph in color, you photograph their clothes. Now, everybody has a soul. So I'm not suggesting this little girl doesn't have a soul. But if she does, it's a pretty young soul. So we won't get into souls and the degree and the age of the soul. What I'm getting at is her clothes. Okay, this is her clothes. So black and white are color. Look at how she's dressed. And I assure you, I have 3 daughters. And I know that they're not going to go out unless they want to wear what they want to wear. So look at how she's dressed. And mom is helping her, but she is really into her clothes. Look at this great helmet. Hold on just one moment. I've got company with my dog here. Gracie, quiet. Get over there. She's helping me. Okay, so do you really want to show her in black and white? Look at this wonderful clothes that she's wearing and this great helmet and this red scooter. And because she's got red hair, my guess is she likes red. So why do you want to shoot it in black and white? Again, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. this was a color photograph. Now, let's just say about cropping, you left a lot of information over here. And if you were going to crop, you couldn't crop enough. So this is a lot of information. So I like this idea. And it does create a certain amount of tension. Look at the exposure on this leg. Maybe she's just got a tan. And look at the exposure here. So she's out more in the light than she is. And this is another thing that you want to be paying attention to, is the difference in this exposure. She's overexposed, and this person is properly exposed. But it was a good idea. And it really does suggest tension by having this person leaving the frame. So it's unfortunate that I would rather have this person leave the frame and recompose her, because there's going to be a lot more expression. She's not through giving you expressions and stuff. And last thing is, did you know this person? If you did, that's great. If the parents are around, you did ask permission to shoot this kid, right? Because that's really important to do, is ask permission, and then also offer to send them an email to send them a copy. Okay, you don't know how to capture the light. Okay, well, dynamic range, and you got it going against you. So you're not going to get any detail in here at all, nothing, and expect to get a good exposure out there because of the dynamic range. There's just no way. You're either going to get detail in here and blow out those highlights, which I love doing, but not in this case, or the other way around. But you got to expose for these highlights. Now, if you're letting that camera make your decisions, that's not in your best interest. If you shoot on manual and you expose for those highlights, and then later try to open up the shadows. And if you're shooting in RAW, you're going to have a lot of information in it, and you're probably going to be open. You're going to be able to. But you know, that said, I don't mind the silhouettes. I think it's fine. And I like the way that you have framed them. Another way to create visual tension is to frame your subject within a frame. So this creates visual tension because you're making that viewer go into the frame to see them. And that's what creates the visual tension. So, okay, but how do you get a good exposure there? They would be dark if you did. For one thing, since you've got control, and I assume you do, get them out in that light. Get some sunlight on them. And then if you expose for the highlights, you'll get them all properly exposed. So that's what basically you need to do, because this is all overexposed. So that's the thing you got to be thinking about, is that dynamic range, and move them out into the sun. Don't be afraid to move people. I don't photograph what I see because I never see what I want. So I photograph what I'd like to see. And so I have no problem moving them out there so they have some light on them. Okay, here's the key word. No matter how many times I photograph them, they appear to be boring. Okay. So here's the issue. Here's the problem, and it's not really a problem, is that I'm looking here and I see this shadow, right? Okay. That means that sun was probably right behind her and over her shoulder. And so that's going to render everything flat. There's no depth. Form is a basic element of visual design. And form refers to the three-dimensional qualities of an object. You have height, width, and depth. Those are the three dimensions. So the only way to create the third dimension, which is form, is to side light. Now, in this situation, anything translucent, whether it's water or grass or flowers or leaves or anything, I want a backlight. I want them to glow. And if you are backlighting these or creating something other than front light, it's going to make a lot of difference. The first thing that I do before I'm about to take a shot is that I look around to see where the source of that light is. First thing. I never, unless it's a grab shot and I'm street shooting and I'm going after a moment. Besides that, I want to see the direction of that sun. I want to make sure that I am in the best possible light. So what I look at is, if you can see my cursor, and if you put an imaginary clock right here over the image, okay? Come on. This is 12 o'clock. This is 3 o'clock. This is 6 o'clock. And this is 9 o'clock. When I shoot, I always try to make all my subjects, the light be within 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. I rarely will shoot when that sun is at the 6 o'clock position, which is front light and right behind me. Pretty rare. I'm not going to say never, because as Ansel Adams once said, there are no rules for good pictures. There's just good pictures. So I want to figure out a way to backlight these things instead of front light. And I assure you that once you start thinking about the light before you think about the subject, I guarantee you your work is going to get stronger and stronger. And then also, if you were listening to me, that I was talking about, get yourself some glycerin. You can get it online. It's not harmful. It's basically sugar water. You get some glycerin, you get a little sprayer, and you spritz, just some quick spritz, some drops on this to make it look like it just got through raining, or some dewdrops. And this way you're an artist, you're making pictures, but you still got to think about that light. Think about that light first. It will make a huge difference. The majority of my career was shot with film, and I shot Kodachrome 25. And when I needed high-speed film, I shot Kodachrome 64. You always shot on a tripod. That's why I'm so fast. The tripod is just an extension of the camera for me. So that's what we did. That's how we shot. And I can tell you that people that have fallen in love with photography after the digital age are really missing a lot. People think that all these plugins, all these programs, all these things is part of photography, and it's not. It's computerized. This is just my opinion. It's not photography. So that's what's happened with the digital era, digital photography. Now, there's a lot of good things about it, but there's an equal amount of things that are not good and not helpful in making people stronger photographers. I was very lucky, as I said, because my background is in film. Okay, so were you all hesitant first? Well, as people that know me, I hate change. I don't like change at all. Hate it. So I may have been the very last person on earth to switch to digital. But by then, Kodachrome was not being made, and I was shooting Fuji, which is a beautiful film. But it was time to make the move. And so I made the move, and with help from people showing me how and teaching me. And it took me a long, long time because, unfortunately, unlike Nick DiPasquale, I'm not a left-brain thinker. So it took me a while. In fact, I probably use about 15 or 20% of what's capable with my Canon Mark III. But that's fine. That's all I really need, and I'm satisfied with the way my pictures turn out. So that for me was a problem. And I actually did a PowerPoint that Nick helped produce. And it was talking about life before Photoshop and what you did to make good pictures before Lightroom, before Photoshop. And as I said, Adobe was a type of house. Okay, so also, do you have a go-to or favorite camera? Well, when I'm doing my workshops and we're walking around, I have two cameras. I have a Lumix LSC, a Lumix DXC LX7 camera, and it does everything that my big Canon Mark III does. It does everything, everything. And it has a 24-90 lens on it, and it's a German-made lens, and it's a 1.4 or 1.2 lens, extremely fast. Now that is around my neck, and my Canon Mark III with a 17-40 is over my shoulder. And those are the two cameras. So I can walk around and I basically have from 24 millimeters to 90. And if you go to my website, I can guarantee you that you don't know which camera I used for which picture, because it's not about the camera. It's not the kind of camera. It's not a favorite camera. It's the 10 inches behind that camera that matter. One last thing is, I do vary it. A lot of people will go out with one lens, a prime lens, and that's all they do. I don't have any prime lenses because they're very, very difficult for me to get. And when you walk around with a prime lens, it reminds me of a saying, and that is, if you have a hammer in your hand and everything looks like a nail, you've got a problem. Thank you all. I hope that I didn't take up too much time. And you,
Joe, we actually have one more picture.
That's right. We could have one more picture. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So I need you to stop the share so I can share my screen.
I'm stopping the share.
Cool. Okay, so now I'm going to
Did
share.
that right? I hit stop share.
You did it. It's amazing.
I know. It took 45 minutes for you to get me to where I could find that.
Okay, can you see the screen? So this is in Lightroom, and this is Lilia's picture.
Okay, so Lily is the woman I talked about who is producing the workshop in Italy. In fact, there is one woman that I know for sure, Deb Perry, that is going to be on that, as well as Nick, and she is producing this photograph. So,
and actually, Stephanie's with us, and I think she'll be there too.
Okay, yeah. I'm talking about people that I've looked at images.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, so so living in New York certainly has more issues than most people. And so this is a shot I'm going to gather from her window because of the fact that, you know, up until, I don't even know if you can still go out or if you still want to go out. So this is the shot she took. It's a very cool photograph. And here's the things that I like about it, is that the street, if you look at it and if you think about continuance and if you think about a vanishing point, this is almost a classic vanishing point. And in my part 1 class, we work on vanishing points. It's a way to move that viewer around the frame. And a vanishing point consists of a point, plane, and line. And that's the point before, on, or just past the horizon line. So you can see that she has that. The plane, that's what the camera sees in 2 dimensions. So that's everything in the composition. Everybody's always going to get one of them. And the third one is the lines. Those are the parallel lines that begin behind the camera and converge at a point before, on, or just past the horizon line. And so this vanishing point is just a vehicle that's moving that viewer down that vanishing point. And what is interesting is that while that viewer is moving down that vanishing point, the subject, which are the cars, is coming away from it. So that creates a certain amount of tension. And that's also one of the concepts in Gestalt, which I really don't have the time to get into. But, you know, and that sun was just perfect. You know, and Eddie Adams, a real famous Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, once said, when you get lucky, be ready. And she was lucky and she was ready. It's really a very cool photograph, given the circumstances. Now, one thing that I would wish for is that these flowers in the foreground were sharper. So I don't know if she was hand holding it or if she was on a tripod, but one thing I would want are these flowers. And it's really weird because I have this exact pot of flowers in our backyard right now. So I would want to get these. And depending on when she started shooting this, if that sun was much higher and she waited till she got there, and if it's so, while I was waiting, I would figure out some way to put some ancillary light on these flowers.
Lilia just made a comment. She said that she was hand holding, that she ran in to get the camera when she saw the sun, and it was totally unplanned.
Okay. Well, that explains. Fortunately, the flowers are way out of focus, so it's really not an issue as if they would have been in sharp focus. But it's very lucky that she saw that and she grabbed it. It's a very cool shot, but it has more to it than, as I just described, all the reasons why it's a good shot. And I can show people how to improve their eye, how to take stronger images. But what's important for people to know is why they are. It's the how, but it's also the why. The end.
Great. The end. So Joe, thank you very much. We really appreciated the time and effort that you put into putting on this workshop tonight. And we're getting a lot of comments from people thanking you and acknowledging what a contribution you've made to them and some of their teachings and training. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, the one thing that is to plug your Lightroom is, and I've got people to sign up. You know, Nick is expert in Lightroom and Photoshop. I mean, he really is. And I've got people, and a lot of people have signed up for his classes. It's really something that you should be considering, is to take his class. And then also, of course, my online classes. Hopefully one day we'll shoot together side by side in a workshop. And then I also have a 6-month mentoring program. If you're interested, email me and I'll send you the description. That's it for the plug.
That's it for the plug. Okay, everybody. So everybody who registered or attended, we actually recorded the presentation tonight, so I will be sending out the link probably tomorrow. So in case you want to go back in and take another look, and I'll also send you the link to Joe's other presentation that he gave, I don't know, about 6 weeks ago now, Joe, right? So, and that's Life Before Photoshop. So everybody, thank you very much, and we will catch you later. We'll see you next week. Next week, haven't figured out what the topic is yet, but I will let you know by Monday. Thank you, everybody.